Yo, this is Derrick Broze of the Conscious Resistance Network. Today is Friday, November 7th, 2014. Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of the Conscious Resistance Live. Second edition of doing this as an audio podcast is actually number 29 of the total Conscious Resistance we've been doing since last November, 1 year ago now. So, thank you for checking us out. I want to catch up with you about what's going on this week on the Conscious Resistance website, what we've been doing on the network. What's big in the news this week from my articles I've written for the Liberty Beat, Ben Swan, and Tony Stiles. And also in the second half of this hour-long podcast, we're going to talk with Conscious Resistance writer, also writer for several other websites, and my writing partner, John Vibes, who's in town this weekend in Houston. We're going to talk about our book, upcoming book, The Conscious Resistance, Reflections on Anarchy and Spirituality. And yeah, so stay tuned for that. First up, I want to let you guys know about some new content we put out this past week. Of course, Katie Chaos continues to put out her videos. She put out one called Lena Dunham is Insane, Feminism Thoughts on 2014. Obviously looking at the year in feminism and what she considers to be extreme feminism. Check that out. Of course, a very interesting and divisive topic. Also, we got the second edition of this series that we've been receiving from Francis, who's writing from the mountains of Argentina. Recently got in touch with me. It's called How to Live What You Believe, and we put out part 1 and part 2, and I really, really highly recommend it to everyone who's interested in an introspective piece about how to learn what you value and how to live by your values. Jeff for Justice just contributed this to the website. It's actually an interview with me back in May at the United We Stand Festival. He called it The Importance of Confronting Powerful Public Figures. So I guess that's what I talk about. What I do know is if you look at that, you can see my eyes all fucking crazy and swollen from... I took a bike tour back in May, and some of you who followed me on Facebook may have seen the picture. I woke up one day, it had this crazy thing on my eye, and it was swollen, and yeah, it's funny. You can see it in the video. Also, some articles from Danilo, aka Peaceful Anarchism. He just put out one this morning called The Philosophy of Liberty. The other day he put one out called Price Gouging, the Economic Fallacy of Emergency Situations. And Damon Shaw, another contributor, put out The Exodus Collective and the Butterfly Effect, which looks at the Exodus Collective of the UK, and which is basically like this musical free party movement where they would go throw these huge raves in abandoned warehouses and do a lot of work with the homeless communities as well. And they built quite a following in the 80s and 90s, so I think it's worth checking out. And that's all at theconsciousresistance.com, and the videos, of course, are on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/consciousresistance. And any audio that we put out, interviews, and these podcasts can be found at soundcloud.com/TCR live. And of course, we're on Facebook and Twitter, so please follow us and like us. Now let's get into the news. I want to cover a few different topics. Some of them we're going to breeze through just because we don't want to spend too much time on them, but I think they're worth your attention. Some positive things happening, and then we'll talk with John. So this week was voting week, of course. Election day, November 4th, this past Tuesday. I didn't vote. We have a couple videos on the YouTube channel where people discuss voting. I don't want to spend too much time on this topic. I would ask you to read an essay. If you Google search this, is voting an act of violence, on voluntarist.com. It's an interesting essay worth checking out, maybe challenging your viewpoints. But as far as things that did happen, some cannabis legislation was put through in DC, Alaska, Oregon. All the GMO efforts failed except for in Hawaii. In Maui County, they passed a ban, a moratorium, not a complete ban, but a temporary ban until further health and environmental studies, which I think is a reasonable thing to ask. Monsanto immediately released a statement saying that they will be suing, similar to what we saw in other states like Vermont, where people are trying to label or ban GMOs. There was also, I think, 7 different cities in the United States who voted on fluoride. I haven't followed up with what the verdict was on those. But yeah, is voting an act of violence? Is it a waste of your time? Is it supporting the system that you say you're trying to change and fix? Is it legitimizing it? These are all these interesting questions that I've done videos on, we talked about before, and I don't know, I guess I'm just kind of over the topic in some ways. I think it's still interesting to discuss for those of you who are on the fence about it. I know there was a guy, a friend of mine here in Houston, who posted in the Houston Freethinkers group on Facebook this week who said, I'm torn. I'm not sure if I want to vote. I feel like I should, but I feel like, I don't want to support the system. And it started this whole debate within that group of people suggesting their solutions. And, all I told him was do what feels right, man. I'm not going to sit here and be like a militant, non-voting activist. I have my strategies, which are agorism, working in the community, building alternatives, apolitical action as much as possible. And voting is just not in my arsenal of things I do. But what I will say is, you shouldn't let people buy into, or you shouldn't be one of the people who push, and you shouldn't buy into this fallacy that some people say that if you don't vote, then you're somehow not participating. You're not worthy of saying anything about society, or you're not contributing, or you're just sitting on your ass and you're letting the bad guys win, because that means that tries to tell you that voting is the only action you can take, or the strongest action you can take. And in fact, like some of the ideas me and John are going to talk about, there's a lot more, I don't want to say powerful, because I can't deny in some cases like voting has done some good things for people. I just think that there are also other ways that might be equally, and in some cases more effective, that you can take that don't involve working with the government. And I actually discussed that briefly with Jesse Ventura a couple weeks ago. That interview should be coming out. I thought it was going to come out yesterday. It didn't. His show comes out every Thursday, and sometime in the next couple Thursdays it should be out. And in that interview, I told him, when he was asking me about my stance on voting, I told him that we are the only city, the Houston Freethinkers were the only city to have kicked out the TSA off the buses. No other city has done that. This has grown around the country. We stopped it. Houston was one of the first places they launched it. It's called Bus Safe, a program called Bus Safe. And we pushed back against that. We didn't go to the government and ask them to pass a city council ordinance about, restricting this or that. We went directly to the Houston Metro board meetings and took over those meetings, made a bunch of noise, and made them realize that as a private business, this was not a wise move for them to deal with the government. They had to deal with the TSA, the DHS, the police, all the politicians, and they went back on that after they had this huge press conference. That was a big move for them to bring Sheila Jackson Lee and these DHS officials and TSA officials and hold a big press conference announcing this partnership. In the beginning of this, they were going to start searching anyone randomly who decided to ride the bus, and drug-sniffing dogs could come on the buses. They could check anybody's ID. And I ride the bus. A lot of people were out there, it didn't even affect them. They just thought it was a messed up thing. I ride the bus in the city, so I don't want to have to deal with that. And we were able to stop that. And as I said, we're the only city to successfully do that, end the TSA program, kick them out of the city, and it didn't involve the government. So that's one example of a way to affect things in your community and to create change without using the government. Moving on, this one is about a tool that we all use, Facebook. Facebook said that government requests for data user information have increased around 24% in the first 6 months of 2014. This comes from Reuters, saying that Facebook got 34,946 requests from the government in the first 6 months of this year. The company stated that they are aggressively seeking to, quote, invalidate these sweeping warrants and to force the government to return the data it has seized. So, just be aware of that. This should be common knowledge now in 2014, but in case it's not, your information is being monitored by all sorts of government agencies, and Facebook and other people, they may complain about it and things like this, but they're still participating. They're allowing it to happen. There are some examples of different companies who have fought back, but for the most part, they're not. This week, as we said, it was election day. Wednesday, though, was November 5th. Remember the 5th of November. Anonymous protesters around the world took part in the Million Mask March for 2014. And it looks like the biggest ones were likely in D.C. and in London, and also the ones that seem to be the most aggressive, where people were openly challenging the police and pushing back against them. I went downtown for the one in Houston. There was about 20 or 30 people there, a lot more mild for sure. This Wednesday, though, these protesters were pushing down barriers. They were pushing against the police, actually yelling them, calling out. And some of these videos, you got to check them out. They're included in this article. All the articles we're talking about are going to be in the links for the SoundCloud or the YouTube, whatever you're watching or listening to. So you can grab these links and look for yourself. But there's a couple videos. Luke Rukowski was in D.C. RT got some video from London, and they show these police, these people cornering the police at the FBI building, outside the police station. Looks like 1,000+ people in London. I mean, it was going down, and they were being pretty aggressive with the cops, which is kind of interesting. We had this discussion the other day, like, is that okay, or is that necessary? I would say that from time to time, these people need to be checked and reminded. I'm not saying you need to beat and kill the cops. I'm just saying that if they're going to be there and they continue to be aggressive and commit crimes against the community, after a time, you have to be like, okay, we're going to show you that we're not taking this shit anymore. And maybe every now and then a nice big healthy protest, people push back against them, kick them a little bit, shove them around, call them some mean names. And then these cops look pretty terrified in these videos. So yeah, check out the videos. Every now and then, though, that might be healthy for us, for our freedom, for our democracy, to check the cops, the enforcers of the state, and let them know that, for one, remind them that they are people too, and they don't have to be in that position. They can stand with us, and they can actually arrest corrupt officials, corrupt police. We talked about some examples of that last week. But we can see them do that, and they don't have to just carry the line of the state and just say they're just following orders. They can be human beings, A couple of positive stories here this week. One is about an app that just got launched by the ACLU for those of you who have those smartphones. I have a dumb phone, but it has some benefits to it. But if you have apps, those fancy apps, the ACLU of Missouri has just launched a new smartphone app for recording, reporting, and alerting others when someone is stopped by a police officer. This is pretty cool. It has 3 main functions: record, witness, and report. Record obviously records it, and when you're done recording, it automatically sends it to the ACLU of Missouri, so they get it immediately in case something happens to you. Witness, you can sit there and file a report, and immediately it files it with the ACLU. Report is something similar, like reporting a spot, like, hey, letting I think it notifies everyone within a certain area that there's a cop where there's a situation going on. And it's also got another tab called Know Your Rights, and it teaches you, it says, like, if you're on the street and the police confront or stop you, stay calm, ask if you're free to leave, ask if you're required to identify yourself. And then you can tag the location where you're at and things like that. It's called the ACLU of Missouri Mobile Justice App, and it can be downloaded for free at their website. And they also launched similar things in Mississippi, Oregon, and Nebraska. So that's pretty cool if you're in those areas. I think it's just for each one for those states, but obviously something like that could be open source, could be done whether you're the ACLU or not. I mean, we could make a Houston Freethinkers one of these things just for people in our community that anyone could log on to and report. And in fact, we should do that. If anybody out there is knowledgeable at this type of thing, please get in touch with me. Let's make that happen. These next 2 stories are related to drones, and one of them's actually, I think they're both a little bit positive. The Los Angeles City Council tells the LAPD to draft rules on drones. I guess you could call this one positive. The Los Angeles City Council recently instructed the LAPD, the Police Commission, and the City Attorney's Office to create rules for the use of drones in Los Angeles. The city will allow the public to comment on the proposed rules before they put in place, and this comes after earlier this year the LAPD received 2 drones, which they purchased, of course, using federal grant money. Because, of course, you may know the militarization of the police force, the increasing weaponizing of the police departments is coming through federal money that the Department of Homeland Security and others are giving to these municipalities for becoming essentially a federal police force. And a while back, I talked to an anonymous source, a former police officer, I will say that, who told me to look out for certain signs to see the obvious militarization and federalization of the police. He said, notice that police departments around the country are starting to change their uniforms to being all black. And, he said in the past, you would go to one city or one town and there would be different colors, different type of cop cars. It was unique to each city and each department. But now they're all getting the same type of vehicles. They're all switching over to black uniforms. And I know that in Houston and surrounding areas, I have noticed that. And when I've talked to people, they seem to recognize the same thing. So he says this is being done to eventually all of a sudden, bam, the federal police force will be there. They'll all be in the same color around the country, the same uniform, same equipment, and can deal with any type of civil unrest. So it's coming from federal grant money, but this is basically saying that they have to write some rules. And the positive thing I would say is that the public's allowed to comment. Hey, the slave masters are letting you come in and tell them what you think about how they can use drones. Will they listen? I don't know. But if you live in the LA area, I advise you to look up the story. If you know people out there and you care about how they're going to use drones on you, I would check it out. Another one here related to drones. This is called Ground the Drones Project, launched by Women Against War. And this picture here shows some pretty, like, it looks like your grandmas and grannies. I guess they're an older ladies group. I think they've been around for quite some time. Somebody told me they've been around since the 1800s, Women Against War. The group Women Against War has launched a campaign called Ground the Drones in Albany, New York. The campaign involves the Drones Quilt program and a performance play called Grounded, which is being performed at local theaters. For the Quilt project, the women created quilts that recognize civilian drone victims in Pakistan, Afghanistan, Somalia, and Yemen. The Women Against War are a grassroots network of women focused on raising awareness to a militarized U.S. foreign policy. So, pretty cool local community action done, in the name of something positive and raising awareness. And this one just happened yesterday. The FBI, the DHS, and Interpol shut down the Silk Road 2 and other online marketplaces. The FBI, Department of Homeland Security, and Interpol, they seized that one, Silk Road 2, which of course is the second version of the Silk Road that was shut down after Ross Ulbricht's arrest and accusations of him being the Dread Pirate Roberts. They also shut down Hydra and Cloud9. Just last night, this may have changed already, it's 1:30 on Friday afternoon right now at Central Time. They may have already announced some more seizures, but I wrote this last night. Wired reported that an FBI spokesperson stated there will be 3 more seizures revealed on Friday, and I thought this was interesting. Nearly $2.5 million worth of Bitcoin has also been taken by the governments. The busts are part of an Operation Onimus as part of a global law enforcement effort. Now, this is interesting to me. I was talking to John about this last night, about how you really put this into perspective, that basically people have found a way through technology and open source technology and the internet to create a marketplace where you can go and trade and do different things. And yes, look at this. There's 162 cannabis items. There's 33 ecstasy items. There's 119 psychedelics, 33 opioids, 56 stimulants, 6 dissociatives, and 199 others, whatever those others are. You can buy drugs on this marketplace. Yes, you could probably hire an assassin if you wanted to, but you can also do business anonymously and trade. It doesn't have to all be that, but that is a side effect or a part of the black market, but we're not promoting that aspect. That's what we would call, I guess, the violent aspect of it would be the red market. But in general, people trading and selling drugs as free people, that's their choice. Nobody should have a say in how they do that, how they do their business. But the governments, which are this large gang, are coming along basically saying, we don't like the business you're doing because it's outside of our taxable range. So they get the DHS, the FBI, and the European police, Europol, this European Union cops, I guess, some international agency, come together, raid these offices, arrest this guy named Blake Benthal, who they believe is the guy behind it, and steal $2.5 million worth of Bitcoin, a few 100,000 pounds of drugs and other money, and call them criminals and arrest them. I mean, you have to really stop and think, who are the criminals in that case? Who's coming and being aggressive? Who's coming and robbing people? It's simply because they say they have this monopoly on the law, and their law states that these plants, these drugs, these substances, some of them tools and guides and helpers, are illegal, and your business is illegal, so we are coming to cage you and take everything you have. I don't know. It doesn't make much sense to me. Now, these last 2 stories are my top stories of the day, and then we'll be talking to John Vibes about our book, The Conscious Resistance, Reflections on Anarchy and Spirituality. This first one I wrote for TonyStyles.com, and the piece is simply titled, Is This the Future of Liberty? And it's about Rand Paul, Senator Rand Paul, son of former presidential candidate and Senator Ron Paul, who many of you know. And I spend this first couple paragraphs of this piece going over my experience in Tampa Bay during the Republican National Convention, and watching as the remnants of the Ron Paul campaign, the Ron Paul movement, the people who were anarchists, who thought maybe, okay, this could be some possible solution, or who were libertarians or Tea Partiers, or even Republicans who thought this guy is more on my side than these other fake Republicans, or fake libertarians. And that all that movement, all that momentum got crushed and split and divided because immediately at one of the festivals that was dedicated to Ron Paul, there was this gigantic Republican, but with the Republican with the CAN really capital letters and lit up on the backstage when Ron Paul was giving his speech, his last big political speech, and they were already chanting like Ran 2016, and the whole thing was they were pushing that message, and we're like, me and a couple people that I was with, we're like chanting, he endorsed Romney. Like, did everybody forget this, that he just endorsed Romney? And like it was really disturbing. But from that point it was obvious that, and from when we found that officials within the Ron Paul campaign or whatever described the some of the grassroots movement as the fringe of the movement, and were telling people not to associate with them and gave them the name the Ragamuffins, and that really created this like more anarchists, anarcho-capitalists, and agorists who thought that Ron Paul might be the political answer and had some hope, and then now we're giving up after seeing the way the delegates were just completely silly tricks were played on them. People were sent to the wrong buses, to the wrong locations, lights were turned off, the usual things that people who understand like delegate politics and the Republican Party, and I imagine both parties, know that these silly games are played, and especially to keep somebody like Ron Paul out, who was speaking, whatever you think about him, he was speaking a lot more truth than any other people there who are running for office. And now we're in 2014 going into 2015, and the 2016 presidential election, it's already in the air. People are already discussing the potential candidates, and I've been saying this for years, just predicting that from that moment, knowing that Rand Paul was going to be the puppet they were going to push, that it would be Rand Paul versus Hillary Clinton. And that could still change over the next couple years, but that's definitely looking to be more realistic every day, I will say that. And a lot of people have bought into it once again and think that, okay, I supported Ron Paul, maybe Rand Paul will do it. I can, I can believe in him again, and I'm going to vote one more time. And I'm just not going to be one of those suckers. And even if he does somehow get elected, to me, this is the thing that his father's campaign proved, and that other people in the past who actually were legitimate and thought that that was the way to change the world have proved. A good person will not get elected to be president. You don't get that far if you're not already part of the club. That's why they literally changed the rules of the Republican National Convention to keep Ron Paul from being able to win, even though by their rules he had won enough delegates to be nominated and to be in that position, and at least a lot further than they had said he was. They literally changed the rules of their own convention, like just spur of the moment, like nothing, to keep this person out. So again, whatever you think about Ron Paul, he was telling a lot more truth than any of them, and he was scaring the shit out of this Republican establishment, and Rand Paul's not doing that. They may play that a little bit, but what I talk about in this article is if you look at Rand Paul and his questionable character, there are several areas of concern. Some of this has already been covered with his endorsement of Romney, as I just said, but there's also his attempts to get Abby Martin fired after he was running from her and Luke Rudkowski, who were asking questions about his endorsement of Romney and, why, as John pointed out earlier, that Rand Paul used to be talking about Spooner, and in the past he's talked about the Bilderberg Group and different things like that, and either, as some people suspect, he's playing this ultra covert political game and he's going to get in office and then be on our side, or he's now realizing, some people say this is the pragmatic way, he just needs to stop being so silly and stubborn like his dad and cranky, as some news outlets call Ron Paul. Stop being so damn cranky and just learn to take more moderate positions and support Israel and support war. And there's some, despite his filibuster that he did, his 13-hour filibuster, he seems willing to toe the Republican Party line, and he has made statements that seem to indicate his support for drone assassination. Some of you heard those, where he said something like, if somebody's robbing a liquor store, I don't care if it's a cop that shoots them or a drone that bombs them or something like that. Seem to justify the use of drones on American citizens for robbing a liquor store or something like that, So those are all interesting and I think important points. But what I point out in this new piece here is just two different things. He quotes Henry Kissinger, at this Center for the National Interest annual dinner. This a couple of weeks ago. I haven't seen many people talk about this. He takes a moment to highlight Henry Kissinger regarding the situation in East Ukraine. I said the quote is benign and unrelated to Paul's overall view, but the fact that Rand Paul, a supposed anti-war libertarian, takes no issue with quoting a man that is simultaneously known as the greatest diplomat in American history and a wanted war criminal in other nations is quite disturbing. And beyond that, he goes on to praise George W. Bush for his great work establishing free trade agreements, and he tries to take a shot at Obama, saying that Obama is not moving quick enough on the Trans-Pacific Partnership that many of you know about, and if you don't know about, then please do get educated on it. The links are here in this article. There are several links to work by the Electronic Frontier Foundation. There's also leaks from WikiLeaks that showed chapters of the document that is basically a transnational, international, multi-national agreement that will affect IP, trade, the internet in a number of different ways. It creates a international governing corporate body essentially that can overrule the individual nation states for various things, and it's very worrisome. There's been President Obama have been trying to use this fast track approach to get it through real quick, and yeah, there's a number of things wrong with that. If you don't know what the TPP is, please look into it and the reality of the dangers behind it and why Rand Paul choosing to support it and tell Obama that he needs to hurry up and get it passed and talk about it as if it's a good thing, that he needs to look into it deeper. And I don't believe that Rand Paul is uneducated and hasn't looked into that and isn't aware that that's not going to work out the best for America. So to me, that says if he supports those type of interests, he either hasn't looked into it deep enough, or he believes the side effects, the negative outcomes of that deal are worth the trouble. So I end this with saying, if you plan on voting the 2016 presidential election, I ask you to spend more time researching the candidates. Regardless of who the Republican and Democrat elite place in front of you, remember that those candidates would not be in that position without some level of agreement to carry the party line. Ron Paul and thousands of other individuals who run for office with the best intentions are never given a dime or a moment in the limelight because they are not part of the club. So when you go to the ballot box and you see a Hillary or a Rand or some other minion of the state, remember this: it's a big club and you ain't in it. Yeah. So, yeah. What do you guys think about that? I want to hear your thoughts on Rand Paul, and if that's right. Am I giving up too quickly on the 2016 elections? I know there's probably some of y'all who disagree with me, and we've talked about this through Facebook and social media. Some of y'all who disagree on my views on voting. I work locally to get rid of fluoride, and if there was some way, if they somehow put that on the ballot, would I go vote for it? Probably. I'm still pursuing and trying to get these city council members just to do it on their own and just lobby and do this persuasion, not coercion, right? And really try to live that model. But at the same time, if I had a chance to do it, I would probably do it, because the way I see it is I'm not lobbying or pushing the government or trying to use the force of the state to create a new law. I'm trying to get them to stop doing something they shouldn't be doing in the first place. There's a difference to me, and it won't cost them any money. In fact, it'll give people back some of their money, or at least have it not used to buy poison. It will stop force medicating people, and that's a whole other issue. I don't want to get lost into that, but that's the only thing that I really work on local, politically, things like that I can sort of justify. And again, it's because I'm not trying to pass any type of law. I'm trying to get them to peel back something they shouldn't be doing in the first place. All right, last story, and we're going to talk with John. This one comes from benswan.com. I just posted this yesterday, and I'm hoping that it'll get some more views because I haven't seen it covered. It's called Exclusive Redacted ATF Gunrunning Documents Hint at Secret Surveillance Tactics. And this is about a story that I saw posted on Judicial Watch, which is a conservative watchdog group that looks at all kinds of information related to government corruption, and they have been some of the most heavy, in-depth investigators of the Fast and Furious scandal, constantly releasing new documents from FOIA requests they're doing and suing the federal government, just staying on top of it. And so I've been following them quite a bit on their research. And they found a new federal audit that came from the Office of the Inspector General with the Department of Justice. Basically, they did a study that examined the failure. They've already done one study in September 2012 on the failures of Operation Fast and Furious and Wide Receiver, which of course were the two gun running programs that started under George Bush and continued under President Obama, that ended up in the deaths of Mexican citizens and at least one American citizen, Border Patrol agent Brian Terry. And they found all sorts of failures, that saying that there was a failure to adequately consider the risk to public safety in the U.S. and Mexico. And they say that the failures as well stem from a strategy of not taking overt enforcement action against individuals making unlawful firearm purchases. So people are buying guns illegally, which I don't necessarily have a problem with in it per se. But my point is that these people in the government are saying that they're trying to track criminals. They find people who are smuggling or selling weapons to cartels, and the government is either giving them the guns directly, supposedly, if we're taking them for their word, if it's not a deeper conspiracy and they're not actually just directly supplying them under the guise of like trying to track it, and then oops, we lost it, it's questionable. But supposedly they are helping or delivering these guns, and they're marking them in some way in order to track them, and they lose them. That's what happened in Fast and Furious. Well, this latest report examines the ATF, Customs and Border Patrol, Immigration Customs Enforcement, also known as ICE, and their failure to apprehend weapons smuggler Jean-Baptiste Kingery. He has been monitored since at least 2008, November 2008, when he was, until his arrest recently in August 2011. He first came to the attention of these agents when he was suspected of making illegal purchases of AK-47s, and they began communicating with him. They came and interviewed him in December 2008 in Arizona, and then they monitored him for another year. And they found out he was ordering components for grenades from an online military surplus dealer. And this began a period where they would just start tracking him and monitoring him. They intercepted his delivery of grenade fuses, spring kits, all the different things you need to make a live grenade. And they suspected that what he was doing was ordering these and then traveling down to Mexico and then putting them together and selling them to drug cartels. So they began tracking him. Now, as part of this, the ATF agents marked the intercepted grenade components in a manner that would allow them to be identified later. But exactly how they did this is unknown, because the document contains redacted text, blacked out, censored text related to the technology that is used to track the weapons. It says, Spencer worked with the ATF laboratory. According to witnesses, he'd previously developed a technique to mark items in a manner that would allow the mark to blank, 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 and be identified afterwards. On October 29, 2009, Spencer emailed Hacker informing him of the technology's existence and told him that the process had never been used before, but that he thought the Kingery investigation was a, quote, great opportunity to test the procedure. So some unknown, never before used technology before 2009 used to mark these grenade components. And then what they had is undercover agents with the ATF then delivered the components to the address that he had. So my guess is they either dressed up as post office or UPS, somebody delivering these packages. Whoever would deliver the packages, they were undercover agents. So that's important to take into account, that if you're ordering illegal things, the people delivering your stuff, just because they're dressed like a postal worker or a UPS driving the brown truck, doesn't mean that they actually are. And that should be common sense these days. But just realize these type of things happen. It's not just in Hollywood spy movies. And from there, it goes on to note some different interesting things. Like, this guy found out that they were monitoring him. He came up and knocked on the agent's window and was just like, what do y'all want? And then later he smashed all the GPS sensors that they'd put on his vehicle. And they ended up just like stopping and monitoring him because he found out. And they didn't get him, and he went into Mexico. And they do this back and forth. Eventually they lose track of him. And at one point, I think it's in 2012, they have two different incidents where they detain men who have live grenades, and several of the grenades these guys are using to fight against Mexican soldiers and as part of the cartels are marked in the same way that the government had marked them. So they lost track of this guy. He ended up being able to sell them or get rid of them, or somehow these guys got them, and the government is basically failed to intercept him. This is the problem, is they're saying that the assistant U.S. attorney for the Central District for Arizona, Emery Horley, refused to make any arrests, refused to press any charges. So, of course, there's all these bureaucracies fighting amongst each other. This is like the failure of government. These guys just go back and forth, tossing the blame around about, it was ICE's fault, and it was the Border Patrol, it was the ATF's fault, and apparently they say that their relationship are, quote, horrible. They undercut and withhold information from each other. They have a lack of coordination. There's friction between them. All this bullshit. They're supposed to be keeping you safe, is right. It's what it's all about. But the report concludes that The ATF's failure to charge this guy demonstrated an inadequate consideration of public safety, that he was a dangerous person, and they didn't do anything about it. And this is, of course, just the latest in the Fast and Furious, similar scandals like this. And another reason why I don't understand why people like President, well, I do understand, but I don't understand why more of you out there aren't upset that the president, this attorney general, are essentially criminals who've been involved with all kinds of scandals and crimes like this, but have had no charges brought to them. Eric Holder was, of course, the first sitting attorney general to be held in contempt of Congress. That was sort of a big deal. But now it's become a partisan issue where if people talk about it, it's like, oh, that's just a Republican conspiracy. There's really nothing going on. Like, they're just trying to blame Obama and Eric Holder because he's black and whatever. I mean, I've heard these things from the NAACP. I interviewed them here in Houston, asked them why they support him, why they have unwavering support for him. And they said, they told me, one of their directors told me, the good outweighs the bad. So even if it was true, the good outweighs the bad. And that's just how they work. But anyways, please check that out. That one's at benswan.com. That is... up there right now, so check it out. Now I am going to bring on to the show, the podcast, my friend John Vibes, who is here in the city for a couple of days. And we've been working on our book. That, I mean, if you've been paying attention to my work for any time recently, the past year, the past couple of years, and you've heard me or John mention this book that we've been putting into action called The Conscious Resistance: Reflections on Anarchy and Spirituality. And now that we're actually face-to-face for only the second time in our friendship, we're actually going to get to work on this. So what's going on, man?
I think that was the third time, actually.
Third time, okay.
Yeah.
First time at Adam's house at that show, hanging out with Born of Osiris.
Yeah.
Or was it them, or who knows, it Chelsea Grin or some band or something?
Yeah. And then I think I picked you up a second time.
Oh, yeah, then you took me to Baltimore, right?
Yeah. See?
And then now we're in Houston. All right, sweet. So it's been a couple of times now over the past couple of years, and the most progress, though, that we've made on this book, so the idea, I'll let you say, like, what is this book, what are we trying to say with this book?
Basically, the idea that we're trying to communicate is that a spiritual evolution is really needed to make the kind of voluntarist society that we speak of possible, and there needs to be this shift in consciousness. We believe that will probably come before any kind of large-scale voluntary societies take place, because of the fact that the problems that we see today with the governments of the world and everything like that, that's a reflection of these, you could call them psychological or you could call them spiritual disorders that are currently infecting humankind on a collective scale.
Absolutely. So, I mean, we've been, I think, both writing about this idea for a couple years in different ways, and it seems to be like, first as our activism as far as like journalism is concerned and looking for stories and working on topical news items, we keep seeing the same bad things every day. And then I started to find your articles, which really resonated with me, like the 5 strategies for peacefully underthrowing the status quo and things like that were more before I even knew the term agorism, agorism, or counter-economics, or anything like that. I just knew that I wasn't necessarily seeing any kind of solutions in government, and so seeing you write about these ideas that were outside of that really helped me start looking in that direction. And then also, because for me, my spiritual understanding, the spiritual side, came before activism, which I guess was the beginning of my activism, just kind of having that and then becoming more politically aware and bringing that awareness into it. So they just seem to go hand in hand, and I feel like every time that I've talked about it publicly or written about it or we've had videos about it, people respond to it well. Like, so obviously we know that there's a need and a want in the market for these ideas.
Yeah, and I just think that it really has not been discussed a whole lot, and I feel that the area that we're kind of reaching into with this has been traditionally monopolized by religion, or at least in the past several hundred, maybe even thousands of years. It's been monopolized by political organizations that centrally control what people believe about what happens beyond the five senses. So, for most people, they see that the whole issue of spirituality in kind of that one-dimensional way, where it's religion versus science or things like that, where in reality, a spiritual way of a spiritual path is not necessarily out of line with being free or even being intelligent or rational. So I think that's one of the ideas that we're really trying to communicate. And over the years, as we started to put this out, at first it was a really rare thing, and now more and more, you and I both are starting to come across people who appreciate it more.
Absolutely, yeah. We just had Nick Burnaby of the Anti-Media walk in the room, and it just filled our hearts with love. But so like you said, these ideas have definitely
and Scott too.
And Scott, we got the Anti-Media crew in the house. These ideas definitely have started to resonate and respond to people. Like, I know when I spoke, we were both sort of excited and pumped about this idea or this possibility of me speaking about our ideas at Anarchy and NYC in front of a bunch of atheists or whatever, and like, okay, well, how are they going to respond to this, and what is it going to mean? And then started to get positive response in those videos and those speeches and articles, and every time we release an essay related to the book, people do resonate with it, and I've started to get more and more questions about what information do you have about meditation, or where can I start reading about Zen, or just different things like that, where people are trying to find ways to reach into those topics. And I think as well the conversation we were having with Scott before was really important too, that the idea of, as activists and as independent media and as human beings in general, creating platforms and content that are more about lifestyles, like creating this culture, and that's what tomorrow for the community, the festival we're having, is about creating a culture, realizing that it's not just going to be, and I think this is what the conscious resistance really resonates with as well, is that it's not just going to be a political movement or idea that creates a conscious change that really creates lasting change. It has to come from a place within, which we would call spiritual, or like a philosophical understanding, an awakening. That's why that word is used so much, because it makes sense. But basically, it has to come from within in order to be lasting change. And in order to do that, we have to create content, create alternatives, whether that means alternative independent media. We have to create alternative economic systems, all these things that agorism talks about, and do this from a place of compassion, from a place of a deeper spiritual understanding, in order for, I believe, for them to be sustainable and lasting, and for that change to be real. It's all about the hearts and minds. That's what we're really trying to change, and that goes deeper than political philosophy or economics or any of that.
Yeah, because essentially philosophy and economics and all of that stuff, really what that is, it's just words and complicated models that makes it easier for us to understand how people treat one another, essentially. So if we can understand or get people on a mass scale to understand just generally how you should interact with other people, with yourself, and with the earth, then you hit it right at the root, and you really don't, ideology doesn't matter so much at that point. It is important, of course, to understand economics and philosophy and everything like that, but the deeper root, which may be an aspect of philosophy, really is just how you interact with everything around you on this planet.
Absolutely. So let's spend a couple minutes going through the outline that we wrote. As I said, we've got the most work we've done on the book done this week. We stayed up till 5 a.m. the other day, just actually sitting down and outlining some of the chapters and ideas that we want to go through, which again cover its reflections on anarchy and spirituality. So we're focusing on defining our position. We're going to define what we mean when we say consciousness in the book, what we mean when we say spirituality, what anarchy, what that means to us, in all these different terms, so that we'll all be having the same conversation, coming from the same place, so we can understand and better communicate and grow these ideas. But so the first, of course, is going to be, I guess, discussions as sort of an idea, a story about who John and I are, and our personal experience and what brought us to this perspective. So that's kind of how we're gonna go through the book. And another thing, before we get into the meat of this, we're gonna be giving this book away for free. We really want everybody to have access to this book. We're gonna try to figure out how to get it printed in physical copy for the cheapest possible, get it into an audio book and like downloadable PDF in all formats that we can, so that we can push this out there. Because for one, both of us really believe in these ideas and think that it's important. I mean, we were both saying how this is going to be kind of cool to be the first ones to put something out that's encompassing like all these different ideas and into the sort of anarchist literature. So that'll be one powerful thing that we're excited about, and we want to make sure to get it to you guys. So as it's growing as well, we're going to be releasing chapters through different websites, so you can kind of preview and check it out, and also suggest your ideas. We're going to be having a couple of guest essays on some of the areas that aren't really mine or John's strong points, and definitely looking for contribution or ideas from you guys. So the first part, let's talk about chapter 2.
The other night we actually, I want to say that we may have coined a term. Now, I'm not sure if that's true or not. Somebody might want to correct us down the line. But we were kind of going back and forth about what we feel is unique about our perspective. And me and Derrick may not necessarily share the same perspective on everything. We don't have a world view. This isn't necessarily a worldview, but this is a way of looking at things. And we ended up calling it explorative agnosticism. And that basically comes down to the idea of we don't necessarily know what happens beyond the five senses, but we do believe that it's very valuable for people to talk about, and it's valuable for everybody to have their own interpretation about it. And instead of having the hostile kind of conversations that we do now, we would have curiosity with one another. And a lot of this is we wouldn't have any expectation of what anybody else believes. Even people who go around as atheists nowadays, they want to convert other people to atheists. I would not want to, convert any other human being to my snowflake of an idea of spirituality, because I would want them to have their own unique thing as well.
Yeah, exactly. And so we're going to be touching on that point, man's disconnect from nature, the fact that these ideas are validated by the self. They don't need to be validated by the collective. And then reality beyond the five senses, which we've kind of just touched on, just that most of us understand. I think most people should understand that we're not taking an anti-science position. I think that's important to state as well. That it's just that we're trying to say that there are experiences and phenomena that exist in this universe that we all commonly share, this experience that cannot be explained currently scientifically.
Oh, well, exactly. And we are also going to give some love to some actual scientists out there who, do respect the traditional scientific method, not these government-funded guys. Like, one of the people that I highly respect in the scientific community is Rupert Sheldrake, and we're going to be talking a bit about him. For those of you who aren't familiar with his work, he likes to do scientific studies on really weird things that scientists won't even touch with a 10-foot pole. So he has done various studies on how pets have telepathy with their owners, and has gotten some pretty compelling evidence through those experiments. And he did a really famous crop circle experiment where he put up a large cash prize for the best crop circle in the world, and they were all pretty much pathetic looking compared to some of the really complicated ones that you would see. So it's just a really interesting way at approaching science, and we feel that, the scientific method can be applied to some of these spiritual things, but it doesn't necessarily going to prove or disprove anything about what lies beyond the five senses.
Absolutely, definitely. So we'll be exploring that angle there, and then also the second little thing that we wrote here was, if government science is bad, how do you determine which science is accurate and that good science can be reproduced by anyone, not just by a scientific elite?
Yeah, exactly. Because we one of the things that we were discussing is that we wanted to have it so it wasn't necessarily talking to just the anarchists or just people who had a background in a particular spiritual path. We kind of want to speak to the average people as well who may not be interested in either and just curious about both. Maybe even the statist atheists out there who say, anarchy and spirituality, what is this? Like, I thought that Republicans were spiritual people. And I mean, that is the mentality that a lot of people have. So, it would be fun to kind of reach out to some of those people too. And I think that, just generally in this world, and I can speak to this as well, people are definitely suffering from, a lack of connection to a higher self.
Absolutely, and I think that that's one of the themes that's going to be repeated throughout the book, is that we're trying to say that one of the things that is contributing towards statism and this lack of belief in self and support for oneself, and also an ultimate faith in some other authority, is because we're hurting in these various ways. And as you said, like lack of connection to a higher self, to these deeper, best qualities in yourself. So we'll be exploring that as well. So that's going to be Chapter 3, Reality Beyond the Five Senses, and exploring beyond logic, beyond reason, what is consciousness, government science, those topics. Part 2 of the book is going to be looking at anarchism. For Chapter 4 and Chapter 5, we'll be defining our version of what I don't want to say our version, but already commonly held ideas of anarchy, but just that we want to start off from the base of anarchy without adjectives, or panarchy, which basically saying that we're not calling ourselves left or right anarchists, even though we discuss agorism, which can be seen sometimes as like right anarchist or sometimes left libertarian trend. I don't know. We're not really as worried about fitting into one of those models or what that even means. We're just trying to say that what we understand and see as a very natural and base state of man could exist in a stateless way, and also respecting that if other individuals don't want to have the same type of anarchy or freedom that we want, that they have that ability to do so. And that's what would happen in panarchy. Anarchy without adjectives is just free experimentation and seeing what ideas work out better in the open marketplace itself. We'll also be discussing the agorist and mutualist alliance, and how I think that that's probably one of the strongest areas for possible bridges to be built between the left and right anarchists. What are your thoughts on that chapter, John?
I agree, and I think that it would be good to point out that with in like ancient philosophy and alchemy and stuff like that, they would say as above, so below, and it was a way of representing the microcosm is like the macrocosm. So a lot of these things that we're talking about, like on a material level, line up on a spiritual level as well. So when Derrick is talking about panarchy and how people would have, the ability in their own communities to subscribe to certain set of laws or customs or traditions or whatever, and then somebody elsewhere would subscribe to differently, but you would not feel any right to force anything on one another, and one of you wouldn't have to be right. Now, this also applies to the spiritual outlook that we're kind of proposing, and it's everybody has the right to believe what they want, and there's this kind of marketplace of ideas involved where everybody kind of like shares what they feel, and maybe there will be a majority believing a particular thing, but that doesn't really matter.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're just allowing people to be free. And panarchy, a belief in, not necessarily pantheism, the belief of I guess you could say polytheism, like a supporting of multiple beliefs, and even lack of belief or whatever it is. We're not trying to advocate one type of belief, or even advocate that people who are interested in spirituality need to follow the particular spiritual beliefs that we point out here in this next part. The last part on anarchy is individualism versus collectivism, and us exploring the idea of, from the spiritual sense and in the physical sense, like, are we really all one, and how does that play into whether or not we move and act in an individual versus collective sense, which I think will be an interesting topic. Then the next few chapters here, I'm going to we can
probably.
Yeah,
speed through.
we'll speed through some of this here, but just basically mention the chapters that we're gonna go through, which is, of course, we'll be exploring shamanism. And if you follow any of my work already, you've heard my theories on that in interviews and heard me and John talk quite a bit about that. But we'll define those terms and also consider some of how shamanism itself is an incomplete term and in some ways could be deemed racist or a commodification of spiritual beliefs, and how we can work with that and deal with that idea, and look into self-imposed limitations. We'll also be talking about dark shamanism versus light shamanism, how the non-aggression principle plays into that, plastic shamanism, also the tyranny of tradition. So there's going to be a lot of interesting topics there. Anarchist thought in modern religion. We'll start looking at Christianity and anarchy, which definitely there are some interesting topics there. And looking overall, I think, at the way that the basic theme for this part will probably be the whole anarchy is to statism as spirituality is to religion. That these institutions came in and started controlling people in spiritual ways as much as the state came in and controlling people in the political sense and establishing monopolies on that. And looking at how some of these spiritual beliefs, as far as Christianity or Judaism and the Kabbalah or even Islam are concerned, are the spiritual elements of that. But when you look at the church and state, apparatus and institutions, you're not going to see that same spiritual message because they have been co-opted. They're the ones that are teaching people disempowerment, which is so. Just so people understand, we're not promoting this like mega church Christianity, worship and give up your own, power to somebody else type of thing. We're talking, of course, about a sense of spirituality, whether it's Christian beliefs, Islam, Judaism, shamanism, Buddhism, Taoism, or whatever, that still is coming from an empowering place.
Yeah, and I mean, these were all just spiritual ideas that were really like underground, shared among small groups of people, and then threatened the establishment. Every pretty much now established religion is a spiritual resistance teaching that threatened a certain establishment order of the time, and then the established order, because certain ideas became more popular than them, they accepted those ideas. Now, to bring it into perspective with what we're dealing with now, the same thing's happening now in the Bitcoin community, because in a lot of ways, even though the government is coming after Bitcoin in some ways, in other ways they're trying to accept it in open arms, and they're trying to say, as Derrick found in his interview with Cody Wilson just a few weeks ago, that a lot of these new Bitcoin entrepreneurs that aren't on the liberty side of things are getting caught up into this government game of, we'll work with you, we'll make this a legit thing. And that same thing happened with these underground spiritual traditions that did talk about peace and love, and then they became justifications for killing machines as soon as you turn them into political organizations.
Absolutely. It's that joining of the church and state together in that power apparatus that really creates the problem. That monopoly on what how you can interpret the world and your experiences. So we're going to look at Christianity, Judaism, the Kabbalah. Now for that area, really, if we're looking for people who might have more of a direct understanding of the Kabbalah, Jewish mysticism, and an understanding of liberty and anarchy and those principles, who can write about their perspective there. We'll be getting a guest essay for Islam because that's not our strongest point, and then drawing the connections between shamanism and anarchy and looking at Zomia, which is written about a region in Southeast Asia, upland Southeast Asia, that's written about in the book The Art of Not Being Governed, and also exploring Michael Harner's book The Way of the Shaman, looking at Buddhism and specifically Zen Buddhism and meditation, Zen and the Agora, how those go together, Taoism, and it seems to be there's a pretty strong libertarian trend in Taoism that we'll be exploring as well, and exploring some other topics with that. And we'll be closing the book out with a section on mental, physical, and spiritual health, where we're going to explore some other topics. What do you want to talk about those, John?
Yeah, we're going to get into animal consciousness and animal rights and things like that. And Derrick actually already has a piece prepared for that some of you might have read. We're also going to get into musical healing and some of our own personal experiences with that. And, the importance of solitude on the path of freedom, which Derrick has already done a little bit on, but I feel strongly on that too, so I'm probably going to make some contributions to that in my part as well. Then we have Inner Child, which I have made contributions for, and Derrick may probably add his thoughts to. And then we have developing a more connected, society with nature, and also shamanism and addiction, because it was, for me and Derrick both, it was a big part of our path in pulling us out of some nasty places. And then at the end, we're just going to conclude it with wrapping up our thoughts and kind of giving our final thoughts on the idea and tying all these ideas together into really, what we're proposing is anarchy for the mind.
Absolutely, and I think that's essentially what it is. That we're trying to say that the logical, I kind of am not afraid, but just unsure if I want to use the word natural, but somewhere along the lines, like an early point. Not that, like, I hate when people tend to do this where they harken back to like 1776, this perfect time of America, or even like this perfect time where humanity must have existed is completely peaceful. I don't think that's existed, really, and that's not accurate to say that. So I'm not trying to say like there was some point where all of our ancestors were like magically working together along this and that, but there were points where we were more in tune with nature, we were more in tune with the earth as a whole, and follow these traditional teachings. And I think that there's benefit to learning them, understanding them, integrating them into your regular life, and then also integrating the principles of freedom into your life. And when you start to do that, you start to understand the illegitimate power that has been placed over us through the political institutions, through the religious institutions, through the financial institutions, and really see that the only position you should take is that you are a free individual, which is, you're an anarchist.
I totally agree, man. I think I couldn't have said it better myself, and looking forward to releasing this.
Yeah, I think that you think we can get this out in the first 6 months of 2015?
I think so, easily. I mean, we just really got to stay on each other to actually get the work done.
Yeah, so we're really gonna. We've got some good response. Most of us been posting about it on Facebook, and people seem excited about it. So we've got the outline written. We're going to start going deeper with it, and some of the pieces already done, and fleshing them out. We'll be getting it edited, making physical copy. We'll look for maybe some type of contributions, ideas for artwork. That'd be really cool.
Yeah, please, because we're going to be doing this for free. So, we're going to try to avoid, we're going to try to take donations for things like artwork and stuff like that. And I'm sure that people can appreciate that that's a little bit of a fair trade. If you have a skill to trade, like we're doing this for free, so if you could donate some artwork, that would be awesome.
Yeah, and then we'll put it out there. Like we said, we really want to get it out to everybody as cheap or as free as possible, and help spread the word about it. So yeah, and if you want to check out John's work, find him on Facebook. Is that the easiest way?
Yeah, facebook.com/JGVibes is just the easiest way.
He writes for Free Thought Project, Anti-Media, True Activist, Punk Rock Libertarians, and he also contributes to the Conscious Resistance Network. So check out John's work. That's just about it for this week, guys. I appreciate you tuning in. I guess I'm going to keep doing this weekly. It seems to be a reasonable format. As I said, I'll put a video version of this up on the YouTube channel. Subscribe to that, or you can subscribe to our SoundCloud, soundcloud.com/TCR live. Check out all the news. All the links that I covered will be in the information. And as always, if you can hear this, you are the resistance. Peace.